So my name is Evan Appenberger. I joined the Army out of Albemarle High School in 2003. Recruiters used to wander around the school and try to get people. They had a quota to meet, and I was one of the people that helped them meet their quota. They told me all sorts of things they were going to do for me. I could pick my place of duty. They were going to take care of my college and my health care, none of which turned out to be true. I had to work outside of the Army for almost 10 years to get through college on my own. And I had to go to my Congress people and appeal to Congress to get the health care that the recruiters promised me when I was going to join the Army in 2003. Also, I ended up going to Iraq. They didn't tell me about that. At first I was excited about going. I believed in the mission, but then I decided once I was there that it had nothing to do with the things that I had been told that it was about. And by then it was too late. Then they tried to stop loss me, and they tried to keep me in longer than my 4 years that I signed up to do. They were going to involuntarily extend my contract without my permission and keep me in the Army longer, even though I had already done my obligation to the Army. This is pretty natural for them and normal. This is just something that happens when you're in the Army. Unfortunately, I'm not the only person that this has happened to. If you talk to veterans, people who aren't recruiters, who have been there, they can tell you all sorts of stories just like this. I started basic training September of 2003, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. One of the first things that happened to me was I witnessed a friend of mine fall down in convulsions on the ground, foaming at the mouth with heat stroke. It turns out he also had pneumonia. The drill sergeants didn't think this was a problem. They accused him of faking it, even though he's unconscious. It took them about 20 minutes before they decided that it really was a problem, that we needed to take this guy to the hospital. So we loaded him on a truck, and on the way to the hospital, we stopped at Burger King for the drill sergeant to get some dinner, and then we stopped at the post office so she could check her mail. And we didn't pull up into the ER entrance. We pulled up to the back parking lot of the hospital. And drill sergeant told me, this will be good practice for you to learn how to carry somebody. So I carried this guy, 300-pound man, into the ER on my back. I laid him down on a gurney, and they put the blood O2 monitor on his finger. It was at 2%. It's supposed to be at 100. So it turns out he ended up getting brain damage from lack of oxygen to his head. And it probably could have been avoided. Now, on the way back home that night, I asked a drill sergeant, how am I supposed to trust the Army? How am I supposed to trust you with my life after something like this? And she said, Private, what do you think would happen if you died tonight? I said, I don't know, drill sergeant. She said, we'd go right on without you in the morning. And that was a huge wake-up call to me. This was my first week in the Army. And the lesson is, the Army doesn't really care about you. You're dispensable. And you should look out for yourself because nobody else is going to look out for you. And that's quintessentially what happened the rest of my time in the Army. And that's quintessentially what the Army has been about since the beginning and will continue to be about. So there's a whole range of factors you have to consider about the military before you join, because once you're in, it's too late. For example, stop loss, involuntary extension. The military can extend your contract without asking you. They did this to me after I had already been in for 3 years. They decided that at the end of my 4th year, they were going to extend my contract for 2 more without my permission to send me back to the war. Of course, I wasn't into this, but I didn't have a choice. This happens all the time. The Army estimates that 60,000 soldiers were stop-lossed in the first several years of the war. And that's probably not even an accurate number. So if you do join the military, just be aware, this is something that they can do to you. They can keep you in longer than your contract states. In fact, Army military contracts are unilateral. That means you have to uphold your end of it, but they don't have to uphold their end of it. If they decide that they need you in a different job, even though it says in your contract that you have a specific job lined up, an MOS, they can change your MOS to fit their needs. If they decide they need you to deploy somewhere, they can do that. Their end of the bargain can be broken Your end has to be upheld. Otherwise, you get in trouble under Uniform Code of Military Justice. So after basic training, I went to intelligence school at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. Part of the problem with that was the drill sergeants had told me all these great things about Fort Huachuca. They said it's going to be nice and warm, you're going to ride horses, you'll be free on all the weekends, none of which was true. I was surrounded by drill sergeants. It was worse than basic training, and what's worse, it was twice as long as basic training. Many people had serious problems getting through intel school. If you failed the test, you got one time to retake it. If you failed that, the Army could put you in any job that they wanted. So most of my comrades who had signed up to be intel analysts, the vast majority of them ended up being Cav Scouts, cooks, and fuel pumpers. So a lot of people will say, oh, I want to be a Navy SEAL, or I want to be Army Special Forces. I met more Army Special Forces and Navy SEALs who were cooks and fuel pumpers than I met Navy SEALs. I was stationed at Fort Hood. When I got there, it was right after the unit had come back from a rotation in Iraq. There was terrible death, alcohol. There was more fatalities, drunk driving, the month that we got back than there had been while they were in Iraq. Fort Hood is a terrible place, but it's just one of many terrible Army bases. And don't think if you're in the Navy or the Air Force it's going to be much better. There were gang fights, overdoses, rape is a huge problem for men and women in the military. This is stuff you need to look into before you decide you want to join. I witnessed gang fights, I witnessed overdoses, I witnessed terrible, awful things, and it's not going to change anytime soon. I was just like you. I didn't know what I was going to do after high school. I didn't have good grades. I didn't get into any good colleges. The future was looking pretty bleak for me. I thought by joining the military that it would help me out. The military would take care of me. It would set me up later on, and it didn't do any of that. The fact is, when I got out, I still had to figure out my life. I still had to figure out college, and there wasn't very much help at all from the government. Any help that I did get from them, I had to get a lawyer, and I had to get my congressman involved. And that's, unfortunately, is the case with a lot of people who join the military. I have friends who were hurt in Iraq and Afghanistan who lost limbs, and they still can't get their VA ratings, the money that they're owed by this country. It's a serious, serious problem. This is what you're joining if you want to go into the military. And it's fine and good if you want to serve your country. In the military, there's other ways of serving your country, but if you want to go into the military, you must be sure that this is what you want to do, and you better know what you're getting into.
So I'm a teen and you're a teen, and I think it's really important that you know that there are options beyond the military for ways to serve your country, beyond what the recruiter is telling you. Things like AmeriCorps, Job Corps, City Year, these are all ways that you can get involved with serving your country without going and joining the military. Don't just listen to the recruiter. Don't just take his words for granted. Talk to people with real experiences like the one you just heard about who can tell you other options. Vets for Peace can connect you with these people, and if you do choose to follow the recruiter, Vets for Peace will help you look over your contract to make sure you're getting everything they promised you. There's more for you than the military.